Michael Jordan, when he came back from baseball, lost to the Orlando Magic that first year he was back. And he turned the ball over at the end of one of the games, and he just didn't look himself. And he was walking off the court, and he almost had tears in his eyes. He was just so frustrated. You can watch it. Watch when Jordan loses to the Magic, and he's walking off the court. And I remember my uncle was sitting there, and we were watching this game, and I'm a young guy, so I'm like, when your favorite guy loses and you feel like you're gonna cry, like you're just so mad because it just doesn't feel fair. So I'm sitting there and I'm upset. And I remember my uncle just watching Jordan walk off the court going, man, the league's in trouble next year. Look in his eye. That dude is coming back, and he's coming back with a vengeance. So what do you do when you have a bad game? When you feel humiliated, embarrassed, where none of your shots would go in, where you couldn't do anything right? One of our members, Calvin, wrote in and asked, what do you do after a poor performance? One of those games where you want to crawl under the ground and hide. It's funny he asked that because just the other day I had a game, and it was probably the worst game of my entire basketball career. It was in a meaningless league, but when you're a competitor, whether it's a pickup game or Game 7 of the NBA Finals, your mindset is exactly the same. So if you play bad, you're very entwined and interwoven with the game. And you got to make sure that, your ego is going to feel it. Let's put it that way. Your ego is going to feel it if you play bad. And, so he asked this question, what do you do in those situations? So it was late at night when I finished my game. And, I left, went out by myself, and I just felt like, that feeling like, oh, you're angry, you're sad, you're humiliated. You wish you could just start the game over. You wish you could redo the game, run it back, but it's a real game, so when it's over, it's over. And the number one thing, so I got on a bike, and there was more to this why I got on a bike, but I got on a bike, and it's like 11 o'clock, so it's late, and I just start riding. And the number one thing you want to do is remember all great players, I don't care who they are, have had horrific games and horrific stretches. They've had games where they want to crawl under the ground too, where they want to hide their head, where it kind of knocks them off balance. And so remember, it's normal. You're not alone. That's why I open with the little Jordan story. Steph Curry this year, think about this. He, at one stretch, had missed 28 of 35 three-pointers. Not only did he miss 28 of 35, but they were open catch-and-shoot three-pointers. He was wide open, and he made 7 out of 35. Great players go through the same things you go through. So put that in perspective, okay? Very important. Number 2 is you want to stop with the self-doubt, saying, the feeling like, oh, I just want to quit. I want to hide. I'm no good. I suck. So number 2 is stop that self-talk. You just literally tell yourself to stop it. You say, I'm going to get better. So in my mind, the reason I thought, okay, I was very tired. I had no legs. So what did I do? I got on a bike, and not only to think, but also the one thing that hurt me, I felt in that game, was just being out of shape, like terrible conditioning. So I got on a bike, and I went for a 3-hour bike ride. Now, that might be excessive, but you immediately want to transform that energy. So number 2 is stop the self-talk, and then as you start to talk to yourself better, number 3, transform it into positive energy. That's why my uncle, when he saw Jordan walk off the court with tears in his eyes, he knew what type of guy Jordan was. So behind those tears, behind your humiliation, is a super abundant amount of energy. It's like nuclear energy. If you don't use it right, nuclear energy will kill you. It's radioactive. It will mess you up, but nuclear energy used the right way, and you have the most deadly weapon on the planet. So take all that shame, that humiliation, turn it into the right kind of energy, which is anger, but it's also courage to go back into the world and get better. Make a list of what you need to work on. Maybe it was a fluke. It's very possible you can just have a bad game. Not a big deal. Make sure you were prepared as best you can, and if you're prepared, you did your best, you just can sign it, write it off as a fluke. That does happen. So, number 1, remind yourself, all great players. This happens to everybody. Number 2, change your self-talk. Talk positively, close. that hole in your mind. So if you imagine your mind kind of like a castle, when a bad game happens or a bad slump, you'll get a little crack in that castle wall, and all these poisonous spiders start moving in. And if you don't close that crack by saying, "No, I'm excellent, I'm awesome because and you're excellent and awesome because you work hard," that castle gets filled up with a bunch of nasty creatures. So you got to close that wall, patch it up, and say, "No, I'm fine. I'm getting right back in the gym." And that is number 3. Take all of that energy that makes you feel sick, that makes you feel angry, that makes you feel humiliated, and you have the willpower to turn that into positive fuel. I don't know of any great player, any great person, any great success that didn't have tremendous failure and who didn't use that kind of, Jordan, to go to another example, he got cut from his high school team. He was a sophomore trying out for varsity and didn't make it. And he went to his room and he was upset and he was crying, and his mother walked in and she just said to him, "Do you know how you're feeling right now? Work so hard that you'll never feel that way again." And that's what he did throughout his whole life. And there'll be not just one moment where that happens, there'll be several instances in your life where you put in all this work and nothing feels fair and it knocks your feet out from under you. So what? Get up. Don't be a crybaby. Don't whine. Don't be one of those people who get sucked into self-pity and start saying, "Oh, woe is me, I'm no good." Get back on your feet. Keep your chin up, literally. Put your chin up, your shoulders back, breathe deep, go back into the world and conquer it. You're not alone. Everybody's had a bad game. If you get the full program for Basketball Brain, we have precise psychological drills that will help you very quickly distance yourself from those feelings as well. These 3 hints are good enough, but if you get something that's really nagging you, we have what we call SOS drills that are what counselors and therapists and psychologists use for people who've been through traumatic events. And, playing a bad basketball game isn't exactly as having a death in the family, but the same tools work because it's the same emotions, even if they're not as deep. This is basketballbrain.com. If basketball is your religion, this is your church.